Okay, getting started here with the next class. You can see from your syllabus the title for today's class, or the theme or the focus or whatever, is something called commitment and stability, staying the course. I almost put commitment and stayability, staying the course. Uh, the reason I want to talk about this is missionary work is the one profession that in the entire world has the very highest attrition rate of any. In other words, of the missionaries that go out, very, very few are going to be there 15 years later. Uh, the attrition rate is so incredibly high, one would even wonder, why would anybody want to do this? Yet, praise the Lord, people still keep going out and doing missionary work. Now, some of them are obviously going to be short term. They got a job to do, whatever it is. They go for a purpose. Their intention isn't to be there for a lifetime, it's to fulfill a certain particular need that's there. And then when that's done, they come back. Others go for a period of time and they fill a slot for a while until somebody else comes in and fills that slot, and that's understandable as well. So those types of persons are not the ones we're primarily speaking to. But there's an awful lot of people that go to the mission field with the idea that I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. And they get there and they start working, and then they wind up crashing and burning. They just can't take it, and they come back. And that's tragic because we lose so much in the way of the money that we've invested in them, the time, the effort, the training, everything. But then not only that, those people come back very much hurt and broken individuals, and the rest of their lives they struggle with that feeling of failure, that I didn't do it, that I tried, I couldn't make it, that type of thing. And it affects them long term. It affects the marriage, it affects the children, it affects each of the individuals in that marriage relationship, assuming it's a couple that went out, all of those types of things. And so for that reason, I wanted to talk a little bit about this and maybe try to help in some way so that we can at least be prepared. Now, the reason I talk about commitment is I think sometimes we fail to realize the type of commitment that we're accepting when we say we're going to go to the mission field. It's just not that easy. It's going to be difficult. And so here, let me stop and compare it a little bit to something that we're all familiar with, and something that takes commitment as well and hard work, and is at times going to be very difficult. That's marriage. When we get married to somebody, we marry a very imperfect person. We get married thinking, oh, this guy is the perfect guy for me, or this girl, man, she's just the most wonderful thing that ever walked on this earth. And praise the Lord that we can develop that type of appreciation for a person. But pretty soon you start realizing, they got faults and they have shortcomings. And maybe one of the big failures of the dating process is that we do go in at times too idealistically into a marriage, not aware of the hard times, the difficulties, the struggles. Marriage is hard work, quite honestly. I was married for 46 years until the Lord took my wife to heaven, and now I'm a loner again here. But there are times when you wonder, can I do this? Am I going to make it? And I think the difference between marriages that fail and marriages that are successful is the two individuals go in it with that absolute commitment. We're going to do this. And no matter what it takes, no matter how hard it is, we're going to move forward. And when there's problems, we're going to deal with them, we're going to resolve them, and we're going to keep going. And a couple that goes into marriage with that concept of commitment is a couple that has a high degree of probability that they'll make it. And I kind of think it's the same way with missions. We sometimes go into the missionary work too idealistically. We're not aware of the difficulties that we might face, and that's the purpose for this class, actually. That's the reason we do this. We kind of want to pull back the curtain a little bit and and show you some of those skeletons in the closet there, the difficult things, the problems, all of that we have to deal with. And by preparing you for them, I'm hopeful that we also make it more probable that if you are called to the mission field, that you'll be successful, that you will not be one of those that come home broken and feeling like you failed. And if you're not going to the mission field, if you're going to be working on the churches, praise the Lord for that. But you ought to understand what those people are dealing with, and maybe be a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more understanding, a little bit more encouraging, a little bit more helpful. It was said once that the Christian army or the Christian church is the only army that executes its injured. And unfortunately, while the person said that was kind of joking to some degree, that's kind of true. And if a missionary is struggling and having problems and they admit that to the home churches, often the result is those churches drop their support. And so we wind up executing these injured people that have got injured in the battle of the church against the world. And so those are the types of things we're trying to make a little bit better with things like this class. So when you think about going to the mission field, I think that concept of commitment, I'm going to do this. And there's going to be problems, and it's going to be very hard, and there's going to be times of great discouragement. And there are going to be times when I just want to throw in the towel and come home. But I'm going to do this, and I'm going to stick with it. And I'm going to work through the problems, and I'm going to find the people that can help me, and I'm going to resolve the issues. I'm going to do it. And in that way, I think if we go out with that concept, we will have a better success rate. Now, this problem of, or this issue of dealing with problems as they come up is a big one, because there isn't a lot of a support network out there. Some people said, well, what we need is a team to go out, and then they can support one another. And the idea is good, but it usually doesn't work, unfortunately. In fact, people that go out in team missions or as part of organizations wind up dealing with conflict within that organization, as well as all of the problems and all of the issues of culture shock and living in a different world and a different life and a different language and a different worldview and everything else. And so missionaries in organizations actually wind up having a higher attrition rate than those that go out all by themselves or go out as independent direct support missions. So the answer is not necessarily a group that's going out in the sense of being held together by some sort of a structure or put within this structural arrangement. It has more to do with developing contacts that you can talk to when you need it. Now, when I was a young missionary, fortunately, there were some older missionaries on the field that I could talk to. I could discuss the issues with, and I could find help. Now, they weren't perfect. They didn't know everything, obviously, but they were willing to lend an ear to my complaints, to my struggles, to my issues and things like that. And simply having somebody to hear you out that's not going to judge you or criticize you or condemn you or squeal on you, as we'd say, get a gossip chain started about you, that means a lot. Secondly, there are people out there that do have particular skills in particular areas, and you can talk to them, find them, make contacts with them. And I say to every class that I teach, the day you finish this class here, I haven't finished the contract I have with you, the commitment that I have with you. And as long as the Lord gives me life and health, I'm available for you. And so if you choose to become a missionary and you're out there in the field and you're struggling, hey, we've got email, we've got Facebook chat, we've got all sorts of ways to communicate now. Old-fashioned letters, I presume, still exist and work. Whatever it takes, do it. And so contact me or contact somebody else. I certainly don't claim to have all the answers. Obviously, I don't. I don't claim to know your situation, whatever it's going to be in the culture you're in. That's too much for anyone. But I've been there and I've done that. And as far as the struggle goes, as far as how to investigate some of this stuff, as far as how to find those answers, I probably can help. And I'm willing to do so. So you might go to secular school, you finish that class, and it's goodbye, you're done, I fulfilled my commitment, that's it. But we don't have that here at Kentucky Christian University. We have a relationship with our students where we appreciate them. We consider them friends and co-workers in the kingdom, and we try to be available for you. I think I can speak for everybody in the ministry department and probably everybody in the school, but certainly in our ministry department. And so as you think about going out, start with that concept of commitment. Develop the contacts and the liaisons that you need when those issues come up. There's certainly a lot of reading material out there that we can deal with, and by having these books that we can read, by having these contact people that can help us, and by having the commitment that we start with, we will help. Now, in tomorrow's lesson, we're going to talk about, or in the day after tomorrow's lesson, I guess it would be in the next lesson, we're going to talk about some of the tools that you're going to need and things of that nature. But here we're focusing more on that primary stuff, the initial issues, the commitment, and how to make sure that that commitment doesn't wane as time goes on by. So you go out, you start facing these problems, you start getting discouraged. That tends to come in waves or in certain periods. When you first go out, probably 2 or 3 months after you get there, you're going to say, wow, what did I get myself into? That's one time when people come back. They just say, oh, I didn't know what I was getting into. I can't handle this. I'm going back. Well, if you understand, it is going to be difficult. Like we mentioned, we were talking about language learning and culture and worldview and all that. You're a baby again. You're a child. You're a little kid. You don't know how to do anything down there. And that's very, very disconcerting. It causes fear. It causes self-doubt. It causes you to question your decision, to ask if you do have sufficient commitment, all that. If you know ahead of time it's going to be like that, it's a whole lot easier to deal with. So yeah, as you go through these things, what do? You simply buckle down and you wait it out. You try to be more stubborn, I guess, than the problems. And at those times, that's when you look for those people that can help. If you're in language school, talk to some of your teachers, talk to some of the other students, especially the students that are getting close to the end and maybe they've been through those periods of discouragement as well. Then once you get on the field, if there are other missionaries around, and they don't have to be from our churches, other missionaries from other groups experience a lot of the same things that we do, and a lot of them will have a lot of advice to give you. And I found that there's a sense of camaraderie among missionaries on a field. Now, at the point, there aren't many missionaries in Colombia during the difficult days of the war when that was really hot down there. Most of the missionaries left, and right now there's maybe one or two others in the area I live and work in, and that's it. And there for a while there were none. I was the only one there. But by the time that had come about, I'd already made it through those times. Now, the next time when you're going to find discouragement is after you finish your language school and you're actually getting started in the field. And it seemed like at first, it's just all confusing. You have no idea what's going on. And it's like, again, wow, what I got myself into here. So you got 2 or 3 months on the field when you're starting to realize language learning is very, very difficult. The newness is worn off. The excitement is worn off. And it's the drudgery of every day learning vocabulary words, studying grammar models, all that kind of stuff. Next time you finish language school and you realize, I didn't learn anything there. I still can't carry on a basic conversation. I'm stuck here. Well, you're not stuck, and you did learn something. So when you first get out and you actually try to use what you've learned, that's another time of difficulty and discouragement. The next time is going to come at your first furlough. You get back into the States and you're suddenly uncomfortable back there because you've been somewhat changed or transformed by your time in the field. Yet it's good to be back in what is familiar with you, where you know how to live, where you know how to talk, where you know how to act, where you know what kind of gestures with your hands are okay. All of that kind of stuff. And everybody does what you expect them to do. So that's comforting again. And people get back and they just say, this is pretty nice. I don't know if I want to go back to that uncertainty, that difficulty again or not. The next period of difficulty is going to come about 10 or 12 years, somewhere in there. Now, if you've gotten through that first furlough and made it back to the field, you're pretty well established. You're starting to become more capable in speaking and in expressing your ideas and understanding their ideas as express them to them. You're becoming more comfortable in that culture and that way of acting and that way of thinking. The logic that they use is different than our logic. And so as you go through all that, you get back in there and things start settling down. But around that 10 or 12 year mark, maybe 10 years to 15 years, somewhere in there, depending on the family, you're going to start having troubles again. Why? You probably have kids that are getting up into maybe high school age and things like that. You're starting to wonder what you're going to do with them. Your wife is starting to long for, those extended family connections again. And I say wife not because the wives are some reason more weaker or more problematic. No, it's just that their values are different. They have that, that family instinct, what we call the nesting instinct. And that's very, very important. It's good. There's nothing wrong with it. But it also makes it difficult to be away when you get to certain stages in life. And certainly those stages of life when you're dealing with teenagers and high school and all of that kind of stuff is one of those. In fact, that's the time when most missionaries often wind up taking a period of time and going back to school and maybe getting an advanced degree or something. I did. Actually, that was a time when I was doing it because it allowed me to be up here as my kids were going through high school and all that. And going out to eat one day there in the university, and we went in this van, all the guys in this class. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 girls in the class or ladies, but it was mostly guys. And we started talking, and every single person in that van that talked commented that they were back there because it was a particularly rough time for their wife. Now, they wanted to study, sure, but they were also trying to deal with this, and did that as a way to take a break without quitting or giving up on their missionary ministry. And many of them did go back to the mission field after. A few went into teaching. I did both. I went into teaching, but also went back. But that's the way it goes. To end this class, I want to talk about the nature of language and culture learning a little bit. And I leave this for last because it's kind of a unit in itself. And you can take this part of the lecture and put it all the way back through every one of these other stages as you come along, and maybe it'll help make sense. Maybe it'll be like the string in the middle of the pearls that holds it all together. And that is how we learn language and how we learn culture. Now, there's this concept that as adults, we ought to do it quick. You know, when you're going to do something new, you ought to do it quick. We're adults. We're not kids anymore. But in the end, you're going to learn language and you're going to learn culture at about the same speed that a child learns language and learns culture. Look at a little baby. How long does it take them to learn to talk? Well, they spend their first year almost listening, looking, and they are. Their little brain's working there, and it's trying to make sense of everything around them. You know, the people, the looks, the smells, the taste, the sights, everything else. They're hearing language, they're hearing words, and all of a sudden they're starting saying, hey, these guys repeat the same sounds in certain situations over and over again. And they start repeating those sounds in those situations. And that's how language learning works. Now, you'll go a little bit faster in the beginning. Sure, you won't have to spend a year of listening and doing nothing. But basically, if it takes a child 3 years to carry on a basic conversation, that's probably about what it's going to take you, really, in all honesty. It takes a child about 8 or 10 years to learn to talk about complex, abstract issues, probably about what it's going to take you. It takes a child maybe 12 to 15 years to start talking about these things like, you know, grace and all these concepts that are very maybe nebulous or difficult to understand. They're very abstract in their nature, and it'll probably take you that. So really the missionary starts doing their very best work after about 12 to 15 years because it takes that long to get ready to be fully functional in a culture, in a logical system, a system of logic, how they think differently than us, the use of the nuances of language. Every word has 2 or 3 meanings, and to be able to play with those different nuances is very important, and all of that. So if you start out from the beginning and you say, this isn't going to happen overnight, it'll help you. And if you realize it'll probably take quite a while, that means a lot too. And so now 46 years, I'm still learning new words almost daily, certainly weekly. Something will pop up in the culture. I say, I've been here all this time and I didn't realize that. And it's just simply a lifelong process. It is in your own culture. It'll be in that culture. If you go in with that idea, that'll help your commitment. That'll help your stability and your stayability. Okay, next class we're going to be talking about some tools and things of that nature.